This morning, we began with words by Chief Tecumseh that come from the early 1800s, but very much relevant today. When you rise in the morning, give thanks for the light, for your life, for your strength. Give thanks for your food and for the joy of living. If you see no reason to give thanks, the fault lies in yourself. This morning's text, which was read earlier, is about praising God. It demonstrates that our faith is bound up in being thankful to our Creator in our gratitude. Without our ability to be thankful to God, for God, we have no faith. Think about that for a second. We are called to be thankful, to be grateful to God for everything we are given, even if we think we have nothing for which to be thankful. We all have times in our lives where that's the case. Luke shows us Jesus on the road between Samaria and Galilee. We don't get the exact location, but that's not important to the story. What we do need to keep in mind, though, is that Jesus is in a land that has a lot more people than just Jews who are present. It's a foreign land. He is the foreigner, as he often is. We also need to keep in mind, at the time of Jesus, lepers stayed away from non-lepers. Lepers are not permitted to live in society with other normal people. We'll put normal in quotation marks for those who are listening to the sermon later. They can't live around people who are not inflicted because they're seen as unclean. They can make other people ill. And as Kathy told JC and Anna, lepers have skin lesions and they have nerve damage. And just to look at them, people wouldn't want to. And there's no medication to help them at the time of Jesus. And so they're put out on the margins of society, literally being run out of town. And they have leper colonies where they live together, those who are affected. And they form their own sort of families and their bonds because they're the only people they can interact with. If a son or a daughter has leprosy, they can't go home and see mom and dad. If grandma has leprosy, she's not hanging out with the grandkids and going to their basketball games. They can't work. They can't be around the people they love, and they have to beg for whatever they have, because if they can't be in their family units and they can't work, how do they eat? So the lepers keep their distance from Jesus because they don't want to make him ritually unclean, but they recognize him as someone who can heal them. And they have faith that just by asking, Jesus will show mercy and heal them and help them to become part of society again, to help them become whole human beings again. And what do they yell? They yell, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. And there is an exclamation point. And remember, we always pay attention to the exclamation points because the Bible doesn't use them, as my grandma used to say, willy-nilly. Show of hands if you like that expression. Jesus tells them, go and show yourselves to the priests, that they will be healed. Why show themselves to the priests and not the doctors? We would go to the doctor to make sure that we're healed of something. A few weeks ago when I had an infection, I went to the doctor once again to make sure that it had cleared up. I didn't go to Susie as a pastor and go, am I good, Susie? And Susie would go, I don't know. Are you? But during the time of Jesus, the priests are the only ones who can say that these people are clean. After certain rituals are done and performed, they're the only people who can say that these people nothing to worry about. They can be among you. And so wholeness can be restored. Right relationships can be restored. But as to where the priest can only pronounce them clean, they can't cure them. That's Jesus' job. We're told that one of the 10 turns back when he sees that he is healed, and so he starts to run to the priest. And when he looks at himself, he sees, we're assuming probably his hands, because he can't see his own face while he's running, I'm assuming. And so he probably sees his hands, or maybe even his feet, if he's not wearing any shoes or is just wearing sandals. And he sees that the lesions are gone. He sees that he is healed. And so he turns back and goes to Jesus. He praises God for his healing with a loud voice, we're told. It's no solemn affair. What is interesting, though, is that he is a Samaritan. He is a foreigner. He's not a Jew, yet he throws himself at the feet of Jesus and thanks Jesus for the healing and for his newness of life, for his restoring of life, the re-entry into society, the ability to even go sit with his family at dinner, to go talk to his friends with whom he grew up with. And Jesus, being Jesus, likes to ask questions. And so Jesus asks, were not 10 made clean? But the other 9, where are they? Was none of them found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner? So what's interesting is in his last question, we understand that perhaps this is a mixed breed of people. Perhaps there are lots of people from lots of different regions, because he says, no one except this foreigner. So even though there are lots of lepers together, they're probably from different religions, different societies, and they form their own colony despite their differences, because of the one thing they have in common. And Jesus definitely has the emphasis on the man who returns as a foreigner. So perhaps Luke is trying to show us that Jesus' message is beyond the borders of Judea at the time and his location. It's for all who believe. There isn't a boundary. There isn't a checkpoint. You just simply have to believe. Jesus then says to the man, get up and go on your way. Your faith has made you well. What exactly does that mean? We hear it quite often in the Bible. Your faith has made you well. Perhaps what Jesus is saying is that this man's faith, the Samaritan's faith, has saved him in more ways than one. He can now be a member of society again, but it's more than that. He's been saved. He knew who to thank when he was healed, and he realizes it, and he comes back and he thanks God properly. What Luke is doing then in the gospel is showing that the leper's response is the proper response to any act of grace that is given. I liked Kathy's question, because thank you is something that we're conditioned to say, and so when people don't say it, we get a little upset, right? But that also shows us how much we sometimes don't mean it. Think about the number of times you say thank you during the day. There's just a conditioned response. What we're being shown in the gospel is not a conditioned response, but instead a life of gratitude. That our proper response to receiving anything should be praising God. So how do we apply the story of the grateful leper to our lives? What lessons can we take away? In my studies on South Africa and in my traveling there, I came across a story that might help us better understand, and I think I've shared it in some capacity before, but I think it's a powerful illustration, a real-life illustration, and so I'm going to share it again. In the 1980s, apartheid reigned supreme in South Africa, and the white government had long before instituted a government of hate and injustice. It actively oppressed and persecuted anyone of color. Violence and death were common at the hands of the government that should have been protecting its people. One way in which the government oppressed people was to forcibly take their lands just because of their skin color. And if you go to South Africa today, you can still see the racial divides. Magopa is a village in northwest South Africa, and in 1984, the government informed the people living there one day, guess what? Your homes, your schools, your clinics, your shops, everything will be demolished. And not only are we going to bulldoze these things in front of you, but then we're going to forcibly remove you, and you have to go live elsewhere. And the night before the people were to leave, a vigil was held, and church leaders not only from the village but all over South Africa were present. And at the end of the vigil, an elder from Magopa prayed. His prayer was simple and not what one would expect during the time. He wasn't riled up. There was no hate speech. He did not speak out against the government, even though he had every right to do so. He said, God, thank you for loving us so much. The end. While we know others were lamenting and worrying about what would happen to them, to their families, how would their kids attend school, where would they live, how would they eat, the elder of the village was like the one who returned to Jesus. He chose to demonstrate pure gratitude to his God, no matter what was happening to him, no matter how difficult it must have been for him. He understood that situations on this earth are for but a short time, but God is forever. Beth, I'll choose you because you're renovating your house. How would you feel if we said, hey Beth, guess what? After church today, we're going to bulldoze your house, and there's nothing you can do about it. Would you be grateful? Would you be thankful?
I don't think so. Maybe a lot.
No, no money included. No money included. We're just going to take your land and bulldoze your house, and we're going to use it for something else, and we don't care where you go. We don't care. Are you trying to tell us you can't repeat in church what you might do? I think that's probably an understatement. Unless you throw a temper tantrum. I think that's probably an understatement, right? What most of us would do. Can you imagine having your home destroyed and being forcibly removed to somewhere else you've never lived and still have the ability to be thankful? It'd be hard to do. Our homes are where we live our lives. They're sacred spaces to us. Having to pack up and move because the government decides tomorrow that they don't like our gender, our race, our religion, our sexual orientation, our ethnicity, and on and on and on, however we're categorized, would probably not bring a feeling of gratitude to us. I'm not even going to ask for a show of hands, because I don't think there would be any hands. Because we can be real in the fact that we would not be grateful. It would be hard. As human beings, there are times when we find it hard to be thankful. Hateful people, bad grades. I hear a lot about school in Sunday school. And it's interesting, the amount of pressure we put on our kids, even in elementary school, and how not thankful they are for that. We don't have all the money that we would love to have. Show of hands if you have all the money you would love to have. Well, why not, winner? Sarah's going to look at you because she doesn't want me to ask her. Exactly. But then if I ask, well, how much money do you think you would like to have? That would be an interesting conversation as well. It's hard to be thankful when we're struggling, when we're grieving, when we're hurt, when we're sick, when someone close to us, maybe even ourselves, is dealing with some sort of addiction, someone who's been diagnosed with something. It's all difficult. Yet, we're called into a life of gratitude because we have faith in God. We're called to be thankful to God for what God does for us. We don't have to be thankful for everything in our lives that gets thrown at us, right? There are things that we're just not thankful for. But as we stand there and don't appreciate those certain things, we're called to be thankful to our Creator. We're called to be thankful for those things that we do have that are good. Our family, our friends, love, life, a job, retirement, if you're retired, and that's what you enjoy. There's always something for which we can be grateful, even when it seems dark. There's always something for which we can thank God for giving us, if even the only thing that we thank God for is being present with us. Now, leprosy is not something that we worry about. Show of hands if you worry about catching leprosy. Not really a big deal. I worry more about getting bronchitis from your parents than I do of leprosy, right? That's how society and medication has changed. Less than 150 people per year in the U.S. contact leprosy, and it can be treated with several rounds of antibiotics and steroids, those medications that weren't around in the time of Jesus. With medical advancements, there aren't many things that we worry about on a day-to-day, and it's surprising when someone does get leprosy, because we're like, wow, I didn't think people got that anymore. So this morning's question, can leprosy today be something deeper? Perhaps we can speak of a leprosy of ingratitude. It's a disease to be unthankful. We must fight spiritual leprosy so that we can be appreciative. We must remember that our faith and our gratitude toward God are bound up in each other. And if we return to the story of the village in South Africa, the elder was at the point where the only thing he had to be thankful for was God's love and presence. A great comparison to the leper. His own gratitude and God's love were things for him and the people of the village to hold on to when there was literally nothing else for them to hold on to. What's amazing about this story is that years later, after a lot of hardship, the people of Magogo were able to return to their village. They received their land back. It wasn't the same, but they were able to return. And if you've ever been to Africa, which I know the folks on these ends have, land is super important in terms of ancestry. The land is everything. But even while they weren't there, their gratitude toward God sustained them in their exile, sort of like those folks we hear about in the First Testament. And their gratitude for what they have has helped them in rebuilding their village since returning when democracy first visited South Africa. we're not concerned about leprosy, what are some of the things that we need to be healed of today? A hard one for the church, gossiping. A hard one for our families. If you're from a big family, you know that gossiping is an interesting thing. I find out things about myself constantly through my family. We need to be healed of lying, of deceit, unfaithfulness to God, unfaithfulness to the community of God, of racism, of hate, of distrust, of addiction, impatience. That is my number one, if we're listening. And a leprosy of unthankfulness, not being thankful to and for God. Whatever it is that we need to be healed of, it can happen, right? We have the faith that can heal us and others in community, to build stronger community, to break down barriers which we use to divide. But we purposely must live lives of gratitude, because when we live lives of gratitude, we're able to praise God for the things that we have. We're able to be thankful in times of pain and sorrow that we have a God who is always faithful and always present. In other words, the God of the covenant. Going back to Abraham. We live lives of gratitude, we strengthen our faith lives, and we intentionally put our relationship with God above all else, and in doing so, strengthen our bonds with our fellow human beings. This ends this morning's word. Thanks be to God.